This is Dan Ferrisi, editor of Sound and Communications Magazine. Happy to be joined by Tom Hansen, who is VP of Sales for Bosch Communications Systems. Thanks for joining me, Tom.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here, and hope your family and you are well, and everybody at Sound and Communications is healthy.
I appreciate that. Indeed, we are. We're in a hot spot here in the New York metro area, but thankfully everyone is doing relatively well. I hope the same is true for you and your team and your family.
Yeah, everybody here in, let's say, Minneapolis, from that perspective, my family's good, and I think the team based out of the Minneapolis office, we're all in good shape. So thank you so much.
I'm very glad to hear that. Speaking about the team and the Minneapolis office, my first question really to do with Bosch Communication Systems is how have mandatory work from home orders, shelter-in-place directives, things of that nature affected day-to-day operations for Bosch, both in the Minneapolis area as well as globally? Are people still coming into the office or warehouses still operating? To what extent have those directives and orders affected your day-to-day business operations?
Good question, Dan. Maybe first we'll take it from the global perspective of Bosch, okay? Because that's I think one from the perspective of a very large company. So from Bosch worldwide, Dan, there's about 400,000 employees. We have 280 plus manufacturing sites spaced out all over the world. So I think for us, first and foremost, it's the health and safety of our employees and their families. Okay. And I think from that global perspective, of course, in that manufacturing layout, we saw this very early in China and in the rest of Asia. So it allowed us as a company to build, I think, a really broad-based mitigation plan. Okay, so we first saw these plant closures happening in China, or let's say the extension of holiday from the Chinese New Year, and then obviously into the COVID-19 crisis. So it allowed us to build mitigation plans, one for our manufacturing sites and also offices spaced out around the world. So I think like almost all that started with maybe limiting guests into the buildings, okay, those kind of things, and then talking about essential work that could be done and maybe that needed to be done in an office or the manufacturing plants. And so then we started to maybe some of the work at home if possible, and then went from there. So with plants based around the world, I would say most are now up and running. They're of course, this is by country and by states, I guess you would say. Most are up and running. Our mitigation plans there are maybe working multiple shifts, spacing out the employees so that everybody isn't together or congregated in areas. So that would be the worldwide perspective, I think. From North America, our headquarters for building technologies is based out of Rochester, New York. Then Minneapolis, where I'm based, is the house for communications. And then we have Lancaster, PA. So those three offices, they are closed now. Same thing. We went from let's say, slowing down and stopping external guests from coming into the buildings to working from home. And now we are essentially all working from home. Both or all three of the offices do have government and let's say governor permission to have limited access to the buildings. So for us, that's where we're deemed essential. So that's, you know, some of our businesses in the aerospace area, right? Or healthcare and aviation and life safety. So we have limited access to the buildings where we need that. And then the rest of the folks are working from home on that side. So it's pretty, let's say, pretty quiet that way. I think all of our employees, the good news is that all were built with laptops and cell phones, so that goes on constantly that way. And I think it's given us some opportunities to do a couple new things, Dan. You know, maybe that helps our industry here that you and I are talking about with the integrator. So, you know, we've really focused a lot of this maybe downtime in the offices on webinars, right? So we have a webinar series for the contractors. We have online training. How do they get accreditation for things, right? We're working on virtual trade shows because of course, next week we would be most most of us would be meeting at NAB, or how do we maybe communicate all of our new product launches and solutions for Infocom now that it's canceled? So, you know, we've done a lot of those things, and I think it's also gives us a great chance from our, let's say, manufacturing base. They've been very creative. So in very short order, our North American plants all went and started building all their own hand sanitizer, so that we're not taking that from the supply chain for, let's say, healthcare workers, right? Because it's a big footprint in those kind of things. Our European healthcare business unit in very short order, a number of weeks, built a COVID-19 test equipment that allows testing to be done in just a few hours for, let's say, the not maybe so much the hospital workers, but more of the doctor's offices and those kind of things. And we have a plant in Europe that's also building masks right now. So we're trying to be a good global steward to the world also during this time.
It seems like Bosch has done a lot of planning, done a lot of forethought about how to handle this crisis. And obviously you're adapting very successfully and doing things that are beneficial to society, not just the industry, but also, as I say, to society. How is your team doing? Obviously, given the very likely instance of a global recession, if it isn't already here, coming soon, has there been any kind of a financial change you've had to make, or any kind of relief you've had to try to take advantage of to benefit your employees and your associates and your team? Or are you in a position right now fiscally where you're not in any jeopardy as a result of what could be a significant financial downturn?
Good question. You know, globally, Dan, you know, again, Bosch is extremely large in footprint, and we're a privately held company. Okay, so we internally finance ourselves. So I mean, when you look at the global perspective of Bosch, we're very healthy, and I think that's essential to us, right? To maintain that and to do it, but. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's impossible in this kind of crisis not to have some effect. So, you know, when you look at our global manufacturing footprints, there are places that we've had to, I mean, just close plants, and then there's times where you're, of course, furloughing employees for some time. So I think our HR teams globally have maybe been some of the busiest, right, to make sure that health and safety, first and most, for our employees based all over the world. And then looking at that and taking those maybe site by site and looking at where and how we help the employee from our perspective, you know what I mean? I think that's important for us.
I think the commercial AV industry has proved to be very resilient because of the diversity of verticals that it plays in, the diversity of technologies that composes it. So at a time when sometimes people feel a little bit depressed or they're just weighed upon by this really unusual situation, do you have any words of wisdom or words of advice for your fellow commercial AV professionals, whether they're manufacturers, distributors, integrators, consultants? You've had a very distinguished career in the industry. Any words of wisdom you'd like to share with your peers and colleagues and comrades?
Well, thanks for the kind words. I don't know if I've deserved all of those on that side or not, but you know, Dan, the way I look at it for us, for you and I, and for others in this industry, I look at it every day as it's a gift, right? We work in this, I think we work in a great industry, relatively small when you look at, let's say, the global perspective of things. And it's always been, as you just said, it's a community. And it's impossible, you know, for any of us, I think, to, I look at it and I have dear friends that work for JBL or EAW. So I think the beauty of our industry is that, like you said, it is a community. And I think the words of wisdom for me is, I'm not sure any of us know what maybe the new normal is, or what transpires out of this over the coming maybe weeks and months. But I think for us together as an industry, it's a time to listen to each other and bounce ideas off each other, right? And to learn from each other. And again, I think we've done that historically as an industry, right? And just to over communicate, right? Maybe that sounds dumb, but it's given us a chance maybe to, check in with people that you would normally only check in to with at a show or say hi to people. But for me, I've tried to reach out to people to make sure, hey, is you and are you and your family safe? How's your business going? So I think we can learn from each other, right? We've always kind of done this together. And I think we all have to be flexible, because I don't think coming out of this, any one size is going to fit, right? So I think the discussions that I've had with integrators, each one is somewhat independent and very individualistic, right? Whether it's nothing in the pipeline today or maybe the future pipeline, right? It's how we become maybe more flexible for them. So it's a great time for us just to listen. You know what I mean? And we're in it together. It's a small industry. Let's not forget that.
I think that's very true. And we are a relatively small industry. I think there's a real community spirit in the industry, even among competitors, even among people playing in the same space, as you say. I think there always has been a kind of unity and a kind of solidarity. I believe this has brought it out even to a greater extent than it was before. Yeah,
absolutely. Totally agree with that. I think, we'll all make it out of this in some form or fashion, right? It's going to take some time. I think, the first thing we all need to do, and that's from the industry and my perspective, is we need to get back to our offices, right? I mean, we need to get back to work, and we've got to get into the offices, and then that second phase is to start to open some things up, right? Maybe the small retailers and the integrators, and let them get back into the work and go from there, and then how we all morph and how we adapt to this is, I think, is yet to be seen. I think the other thing, Dan, for me on our business here and for what we do in our industry, we're really lucky. We have AVIXA, we have NSCA, we have NAM on maybe more of the MI side of the business, but I think we have a number of great organizations that help all of us, right? Because not any one of us doesn't have the strong enough voice to change or drive things, right? But AVIXA and NSCA, I think they've done great work for us, right? And for the partners and small business loans and trying to manage, state by state and local government by local government for loans and right to work and those kind of things. So I look at it, I mean, it's a difficult time. For me, I've been with Bosch for 29 years. I don't think I've ever, I never worked from a home office, and my wife would probably say, you've never been home this much ever. So I'm ready to get back to work and maybe get back to travel. And we'll go from there. That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Tom, for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate your insight. Hopefully everyone continues to stay well, and I'm glad that your mitigation strategies, your strategy in this regard has been so successful.
Dan, thank you. Thank you so much, and have a great day and stay safe.
You as well. Tom Hansen, VP of Sales for Bosch Communications Systems. Thank you very much.